this podcast, from the politics shed, I'll be discussing socialism, setting it in its historical context and describing its developments today. This podcast supports the work and the information and the resources I've placed on the Politics Shed website, which I hope is available to everybody whether they are studying politics or simply interested. Discussing socialism before the 19th century poses challenges, as the term only emerged around the 1820s. Consequently, identifying a socialist movement before this period is difficult. However, the concept of socialism has existed for a considerable time, even before the advent of industrialization. This notion frequently arises from a sense of social injustice, shaped by Christian writers and others who recognized the inequalities and poverty within their societies and sought to instigate change. I remember seeing the Christian socialist Reverend Donald Soper taking on a crowd from a soapbox on Hyde Park Corner in the 1980s. His message was clear. Christ's message was socialism, and the antithesis of everything Mrs. Thatcher stood for. He no doubt drew some inspiration for this view from the Bible, particularly Acts 2:44-45. And all who believe were together and had all things in common. And they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. Human beings have most likely observed that inequality is arbitrary for most of human history. Folk tales and legends have champions of the poor and the oppressed who steal from the rich and give to the poor. Robin Hood, Pancho Villa. Whether mythical or real, reflected the simple observation that in most societies, in most of history, it's the same the whole world over. It's the poor what gets the blame. It's the rich what gets the pleasure. Isn't it a blooming shame? In their book, The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity, David Graeber and David Wengrow argue that early civilizations, particularly the Indus Valley civilization, engaged in large-scale cooperative living in urban-like settings that were non-hierarchical. Through archaeological evidence, they challenge the conventional narrative that equates complex societies with class divisions and the rise of an elite. In essence, they assert that inequality is not a foregone conclusion, particularly the moral inequality that Rousseau differentiated from natural inequality. Moral inequality, characterized by the amour propre, stems from power, vanity, and individual greed. Natural inequality reflects the differences between human beings. The aspiration for a more equitable society, free from scarcity, is epitomized in the medieval mythical land of Cockaigne, reminiscent of the Garden of Eden, where abundance is available to all. Pre-socialist movements, such as the Diggers, embodied the belief that a fairer distribution of life's essentials could foster a more comfortable existence for the common people, representing an early form of agrarian communism in England. In 1649, under the leadership of Gerald Winstanley and William Everard, approximately 20 impoverished individuals gathered at St. George's Hill in Surrey to cultivate common land. The Diggers contended that the English civil wars were fought against monarchy and large landowners, asserting that, following the execution of Charles I, land should be accessible to the poor to farm, especially in the light of the unprecedented rise in food prices during the late 1640s. By 1649, the Diggers' ranks had more than doubled. Their activities inevitably alarmed the Commonwealth government and incited hostility from local landowners, who also claimed rights to the common lands. Confronted with legal challenges and violent opposition, the diggers' community ultimately disbanded at the end of March 1650. Socialism, as we understand it today, emerged as a response to liberalism and the transformations instigated by the Industrial Revolution. As liberalism gained traction, socialism developed concurrently, establishing a significant connection between the two ideologies. One might view liberalism as the foundation upon which socialism is constructed. This political philosophy values individuals as ends in themselves, striving to create an environment where people can pursue their aspirations, think freely, hold their beliefs, and fulfill their desires. Liberals primarily achieve this through laws that safeguard rights, protecting individuals from the suppression of their uniqueness. Contrary to much popular culture and modern politics, the American dream embodies a vision of community rather than rugged individualism. However, the objectives of liberalism closely align with capitalism, characterized by legal property rights and, ideally, a free market that allows individuals to trade freely. In a liberal economy, hierarchies naturally emerge, and both socialists and liberals recognize the danger this poses. Socialists express concern over the negative consequence of these hierarchies, as control over production can lead to exploitation, while liberals worry about the risks associated with concentrated political power. Liberals advocate for the distribution of power throughout society, to prevent any single individual or group from wielding excessive influence. In this sense, the American Constitution is a deeply liberal construct. Separation of powers, checks and balances, and the concept of limited government. Socialists, on the other hand, focus on the concentration of economic power, particularly the influence of the wealthy over the less fortunate, advocating for measures to balance this economic power, such as cooperatives, public ownership, and socialized economies. Liberalism can be understood as a political philosophy that holds individuals as ends in themselves, aiming to create a political order where people can develop into whoever they aspire to be. This, of course, leads to problems within liberalism, since the freedom to develop to your fullest potential can impinge and damage the capacity of others to do the same. As the socialist writer R.H. Tawney once observed, in a liberal society, freedom for the pike is death for the minnow. Both socialists and liberals promote equality, therefore, with liberals emphasizing equality of opportunity and socialists advocating for equality of outcome. This concept varies among socialists. It may entail equal distribution of resources, equal treatment, or the belief in the equal moral worth of all humans. Thus, the idea of equality is central to socialism. Socialists are often motivated by a sense of injustice, particularly concerning the conditions faced by the disadvantaged, the sick, and the oppressed, arguing that these conditions are often unnecessary and unjust. Modern liberalism, to be fair, has similar concerns. However, it will emphasize rights rather than economic restructuring. Socialists contend that a genuine social equality would enable everybody to reach their full potential without barriers such as debt or health issues. Within socialism, there is an ongoing debate about the meaning of equality of outcome. Should it aim to close the wealth gap or eliminate it entirely? Different factions within socialism propose various solutions to these challenges. Some advocate for the abolition of capitalism and the establishment of shared ownership, while others, like social democrats, suggest utilizing the welfare system. Supporters of the third way prioritize alleviating poverty and addressing systematic issues such as social exclusion by addressing measures such as tax credits and increasing the minimum wage. In other words, getting the market to operate more fairly and justly. The just market might be a good label for the third way. This remains one of the key divisions within socialism, exactly what is meant by equality and how it might operate. Returning to the historical narrative, the French Revolution of 1789 represents a crucial turning point in the quest for a socialist society. Although many socialists view the French Revolution as essentially a bourgeois uprising rather than a socialist one, it sparked a radical transformation and became the model for revolutionary action. A prominent figure from this era was Gracchus Babeuf, who established the conspiracy of equals. Convinced that the revolution was just the beginning and that a second revolution was essential to create a society that could be deemed socialist, in 1796, Babeuf initiated the conspiracy of equals in response to the revolution's failure to rectify wealth inequality. His group sought to establish a classless society by abolishing private property, advocating for equality not only in legal terms, but also in daily life, which became their rallying cry. Babeuf and his followers considered themselves the true heirs of the revolutionary spirit. Babeuf is often seen as a precursor to modern socialism, with his ideas of communal ownership and social equality, which resonated in later socialist ideologies. Karl Marx and other thinkers who followed drew inspiration from Babeuf, acknowledging him as an early proponent of the classless society which they aimed to create. One of his significant proposals was that a party employing clandestine and at times violent methods could help realize this socialist society. This notion of a dedicated group striving for socialism has endured in the socialist discourse. Ultimately, Babeuf's conspiracy failed due to a betrayal, leading to the capture and execution of its members. Nevertheless, this marked the first notable attempt to establish a society through the actions of a revolutionary group. This idea, or this socialist strategy, revolutionary socialism, sometimes referred to as vanguardism, that the transformation society has to be led by a small, elite group of revolutionaries, later developed by Lenin and Bolshevism. In the years following the French Revolution, a combination of social and economic changes fueled a growing desire for improved human organization. Key factors included industrialization, the rise of a more ambitious workforce, referred to as the proletariat by Marx, the breakdown of traditional rural economies, and a disillusioned, educated middle class, shocked by the harsh realities of capitalist society. Together, these elements laid the groundwork for a significant social transformation. You can hear this reaction to the changing world in the works of Dickens or Friedrich Engels. This extract from Engels is an example. Thus are the workers cast out and ignored by the class in power, morally as well as physically and mentally. The only provision made for them is the law, which fastens upon them when they become obnoxious to the bourgeoisie. Like the dullest of brutes, they are treated to but one form of education, the whip, in the shape of force, not convincing but intimidating. There is therefore no cause for surprise if the workers treated as brutes actually become such, or if they can maintain their consciousness of manhood only by cherishing the most glowing hatred, the most unbroken inward rebellion against the bourgeoisie in power. They are men so long only as they burn with wrath against the reigning class. They become brutes the moment they bend in patience under the yoke, and merely strive to make life endurable while abandoning the effort to break the yoke. That extract is from Friedrich Engels' Condition of the Working Class in England. In his essay for Harper's Magazine, the novelist Charles Dickens observed a London scene. On the 5th of last November, I, the conductor of this journal, accompanied by a friend well known to the public, accidentally strayed into Whitechapel. It was a miserable evening, very dark, very muddy, and raining hard. There are many woeful sights in that part of London, and it has been well known to me in most of its aspects for many years. We had forgotten the mud and the rain in slowly walking along and looking about us, when we found ourselves at 8 o'clock before the workhouse. Crouched against the wall of the workhouse, in the dark street, on the muddy pavement stones, with the rain raining upon them, were 5 bundles of rags. They were motionless and had no resemblance to the human form. 5 great beehives covered with rags, 5 dead bodies taken out of graves, tied neck and heels and covered with rags, would have looked like those 5 bundles upon which the rain rained down in the public street. These words were written by Dickens in January 1856, and they give a vivid account of the world's first industrial society, and London, at the time, the world's largest city. It was the consequences of these changes that directly led to the development of liberalism and socialism. However, revolutionary socialism had to wait. In the immediate aftermath of the French Revolution, Europe faced a significant conservative backlash. The Congress of Vienna reinstated the old regimes, and Edmund Burke's renowned essay, Reflections on the Revolution in France, articulated the perspective that the upheaval posed a threat to the established order. This reactionary period, spanning from approximately 1800 to 1848, was characterized by a pronounced wave of conservatism throughout the continent. During this time, a movement known as utopian socialism began to take shape. The term utopian socialism emerged for 2 primary reasons. First, its proponents believed that the key to societal improvement lay in the establishment of ideal communities or model societies. Second, when Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels published the Communist Manifesto in 1848, they criticized these individuals, labeling them as utopian socialists, which contributed to the widespread adoption of the term. The significance of utopian socialists lies in the innovative ideas they introduced, which later shaped the thoughts of other socialists, even though their movements ultimately did not succeed. A prominent figure among them was Robert Owen, who founded model villages in both Britain and the United States. Owen proposed that individuals' environments greatly influence their behavior, contending that adverse conditions resulted in impoverished individuals, while favorable conditions nurtured virtuous ones. Owen proposed that individuals' environments greatly influenced their behavior, contending that adverse conditions resulted in vicious individuals, while favorable conditions nurtured virtuous ones. His aspiration was to cultivate harmonious communities through improved living standards. At the new Lanark Mills, Owen put his principles into action by implementing fair wages, reducing working hours, and abolishing child labour. In addition to economic reforms, he prioritised his workers' education and well-being by establishing infant schools and cooperative stores. This community thrived on productivity derived from mutual respect rather than exploitation. In the United States, Owen sought to realise his utopian vision in New Harmony, Indiana. However, his endeavour to create a self-sufficient and equitable community ultimately encountered numerous obstacles and ended in failure. Owen held a steadfast belief in the transformative power of education. He advocated for a system where education was a right for all, not just a privilege for the few. In New Lanark, he established schools that implemented innovative teaching methods, believing that education could lead to moral and intellectual improvement, thereby fostering a society based on reason and cooperation. A central tenet of all socialist belief is that society creates the individual rather than reflecting. Another significant figure in early socialism was Etienne Cabet, a prominent writer in early 19th century France, who underscored the importance of equality. Cabet's Voyage to Ikari presents a utopian society where equality and community prevail. This fictional travelogue envisions a land devoid of class divisions, where resources are shared, reflecting his visionary perspective on socialism, of a harmonious society, challenging the status quo of 19th century France. Cabet and his followers embarked on an ambitious journey to create a utopian society in Nauvoo, Illinois, dubbed Icaria. This community represented a grand experiment in communal living, aiming to actualize his ideas and attracting settlers yearning for an egalitarian lifestyle on the banks of the Mississippi. Unfortunately, like New Harmony, it was short-lived. Another notable early socialist thinker was Saint-Simon. A technocrat with anti-democratic views, he envisioned a future society governed by scientists and engineers. His ideas significantly influenced socialist thought as he explored the origins of wealth, recognizing it as a product of labour. He observed that labourers often do not reap the benefits of their work, while non-workers did, a realization that troubled him. This led him to contemplate how to construct a society where workers could enjoy the fruits of their labour. He critically examined the government. It is largely corrupt and serving the wealthy rather than the common people. He concluded that substantial government reform was essential, advocating for a system that prioritized the interests of workers and overall welfare of society. By 1826, there was a growing movement supporting his ideas, and by the end of 1828, the Saint-Simonians were convening meetings in Paris and various provincial towns. The July 1830 revolution opened new opportunities for the Saint-Simonians in France, prompting them to issue a proclamation demanding communal ownership of goods, the abolition of inheritance rights, and the enfranchisement of women, votes for women. While the sect attracted a range of intellectuals and young enthusiasts, internal conflicts among the leaders led to the fragmentation and eventual dissolution of the movement. You can see a theme developing here. Because ideas of equality, of wealth distribution, and the means to attain socialism are highly contested among socialists, socialism has a tendency to fragment.
Right, you're in. Listen. The only people we hate more than the Romans are the fucking Judean People's Front.
Yes.
And the Judean Popular People's Front.
Oh, yeah.
Splitters.
And the People's Front of Judea.
Splitters.
The People's Front of Judea. Splitters.
We're the People's Front of Judea.
Oh. I thought we were the Popular Front.
People's Front! Whatever happened to the Popular Front, eh? He's over there. Split up!
Before we leave the utopian socialists behind, we should mention Charles Fourier. He was credited by Friedrich Engels with the concept of alienation, which suggests that under capitalism, individuals lack a personal connection to their work because it benefits others. This is not unlike the Simonians, who saw the profits of labour as theft from the workers who engaged in the labour. However, the concept of alienation suggests a psychological condition. Fourier's ideas inspired Marx and Engels to further develop this idea of the alienated labour or the alienated proletariat. Fourier envisioned small communal societies where work would be enjoyable. Fourierism was introduced to the United States by Albert Brisbane, who rebranded it as associationism. Brisbane's ideas gained popularity through the writings of Horace Greeley in the New York Tribune, leading to the establishment of several communal groups, or phalanxes. The most notable was Brook Farm, founded by George Ripley near Boston in 1841. Brook Farm operated until 1847, but on average the lifespan of the nearly 50 other phalanxes in the United States was 2 years. Based on an agrarian handicraft economy, the phalanx comprised about 1,500 people. Work was voluntary and the goods produced were owned by the phalanx. Members received hourly wages, with pay scales increasing according to the unpleasantness of their task, while private property and inheritance were allowed. Fourier believed that people could live harmoniously in a state of nature, free from government interference. Fourier also argued that one day the entire world would be organized into phalanxes. In addition to these attempts at building a socialist utopia, it is worth mentioning those who advocated worker education, such as the founders of the working men's and later working women's colleges in Camden in North London, which still exists today. The arts and crafts movement also aimed to preserve aesthetic beauty and craft skills in the face of industrial mass production, with William Morris being a leading figure, whose legacy endures today in wallpaper designs, in interior decorations, as well as in the idea of preserving handicraft skills. While we might admire William Morris designs, Morris also felt that he was restoring dignity to labor and avoiding the de-skilling alienation, the production line effect, human beings who became simply attachments to machines. And although these movements did not achieve social transformation, their ideas have contributed to the development of socialism and liberals ever since. The dignity of labour, the alienating effects of capitalism, the importance of education and social reform, all of which form a strong foundation for liberalism, socialism, and indeed some aspects of one-nation conservatism. There were also other influential thinkers in the 19th century, such as Louis Blanc, who sought to extend voting rights to the working class, and Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, who advocated the dismantling of the centralized state. However, possibly the most dominant figure to emerge in the late 19th century, following on from the work of the Utopians, was Karl Marx. And it is to the influence of Marxism that we return in the next podcast. Thank you for listening.